Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Birdie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Welcome to the Get Published podcast. My name is Paul Brody, and I'm proud to serve as your host. And today we have not only an amazing guest, but also a client, and that is Sara Adrien. And Sara, I want to welcome you on. It's been a pleasure working with you, and we're thrilled to have you now on the show and to celebrate your best-selling book.
Thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate it, and it's such a pleasure to be on your show.
Well, we definitely enjoyed working with you, and we're excited to have you as part of our show as well. And as you see, we've got 5 key questions that we always want to focus on. And the first question is, what is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
All right. So I love the question. I'm actually on my 16th book overall, and it gets better and faster as you go. But my advice is make sure you finish it. The first one is the hardest, and it takes the longest, and it takes a bit more grit always than you'd expect. But once you finish it, you're going to come out much stronger on the other end.
Absolutely. And could you tell us a little bit about your book that we launched for you? Because I wanted you to tell us a little bit about that, because nobody can do a better job about talking to us about your book than you.
Of course, it would be my pleasure to do that. I still have a huge crush on the character I created, and I'm putting him into all the other books. So you launched book 2 in my series, Infiltrating the Ton, which is Jewish Regency romance. I write Regency romance with a Jewish twist. Some people have called it the Jewish Bridgerton. And this story is that of Arnold, who is the cousin of the hero in book 1. And he's a bit of a rake, a bit of a ladies' man, and he's 24, and he's hot, and he's rich, and he's a little bit cocky. And one day he bumps into the rabbi's daughter, and they hit it off immediately. He kisses her, and her aunt catches them. And, this is 1813 London, so it was scandalous. And she says, oh, well, that's it. You have to get married, which, of course, he doesn't want to do. And she is completely perplexed because she basically ruined herself, and she doesn't know what has overcome her. And from there, we get into a series of a little bit adventurous events, but also some very sweet scenes where they get to know each other, they become friends. One of my favorite scenes is where she makes challah on Friday morning for some of the impoverished and elderly members of their community. And she gets tired, it's hard work. I make challah every Friday with my kids, but we only make 2. So she has to make 24, and she sees him, and he's like glistening muscles and all. And she's like, help me. And he has no idea what to do, but he wants to impress her. So there are a couple of really cute scenes that I like, and some of my readers are falling for Arnold as well. So I hope that many people will get to enjoy the story and just have fun with it.
Absolutely. And let me ask you, in your view, I know you've published a lot of books now, but what do you feel is the hardest part about getting your book published?
Yeah, so I think it's the marketing and the advertising required to build an audience. I have now written 7 textbooks as a lawyer, and I have written 4 romances. And it all comes down, it seems to be the same in all the genres. It seems to be the same in fiction and nonfiction. It's like, if you don't have an audience, and if people don't know your book is there, they don't know to buy it. So even if you're not necessarily doing this to make a profit, like in academia, it's still, you're putting in the work, and you want people to know about it and get use out of the work you're investing. So it's really hard for people to find out about your books. And if you want to tell them about it, you have to market it and advertise it.
Absolutely. And that transitions perfectly to our next question, and that is to please share a marketing strategy that you've used in your book launch that's worked well. And then what I also want to do is talk a little bit about your podcast reach out strategy, because I was really impressed the fact, even before we started working together, that you were already coming up with strategies to get on different podcasts. And I was really impressed with that.
Oh, thank you. I feel very flattered. Sure. So I'll answer your first question first. What has worked for me? It's still going on. So anybody who wants to get into it, I'm doing a giveaway to build my audience, and I'm taking a class on it. And this is my first time. It's a little bit experimental, but it seems to be going well, where I picked out a bunch of books that are really close to mine in tone and in genre. And I just feel like if people read my books, they would enjoy those, or vice versa. And I'm making this package of 10 books that I'm putting out as a paperback giveaway, and people can sign up for this giveaway, and then they can share it. And the more they share, the more entries they get. So for example, if somebody wants to enter this giveaway and they put in their email address, they get 3 entries. But if they share it on Twitter, they get an extra 5 entries. So I've had some people enter this giveaway and they've had 33 entries or 25. So the more they share it with their friends and networks, the more exposure I get and the higher their chances to win. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody who's putting the time into it. And I've built I think I've doubled my following in the last couple of weeks while I've been running this giveaway.
Nice. I love that idea. And then another thing that you've done as well is reaching out to different podcasts. So could you tell us a little bit about your outreach strategy? Because one of the great things about reaching out to podcasts, especially if you're doing this yourself, is the fact that it's really just comes down to sweat equity. It's just really going out there, reaching out, using those strategies, and to be able to get on those different shows. So if you could share with us some of your strategies with that.
Of course. So actually, you gave me the idea, and I heard you in a lecture. And right after I heard you in this lecture, I made a list of podcasts that I think would be good venues. And then I started to research them a little bit. I make sure that they're still producing episodes. I'm making sure that they have a reach that is not too wide, but still wide enough. I'm looking at what the age demographics are for their listeners. And then I basically sent them an email following your advice. And I tell them that I'm pretty comfortable. This is not my first time speaking. As a professor, I'm kind of used to talking to an audience. And I tell them about my books. I offer them at least one of the books for free if they want it. So they have to respond to me. I don't just send it out, but if they respond to me and they say, yeah, I'd be interested, I'll take a look at your book, then I send them one of the samples via BookFunnel.
Well, and the other thing too, and that's one of the things that we talk about too, is you've also used a very friendly outreach strategy. And if you could tell us a bit more about that in terms of just, how you endeared yourself to these hosts, the fact that, you subscribe to the podcast, you leave a 5-star review, and just really tell us more about those personalization strategies. Because I think that's the number one thing people miss these days, that they think they can just go out there and just reach out to anyone and go, hey, I should be on your show, and not realizing, okay, yeah, it's a much better strategy to reach out, to subscribe, to leave reviews, this type of things, to really endear yourself for that personal connection with those hosts. Because at the end of the day, podcast hosts are just like authors. We're all about getting reviews.
Yes, so I feel them. I'm also trying to get reviews. And again, I can't take credit for it because you gave me the idea. But what I do is I look at sometimes they have a website, sometimes they only have it on iTunes or so I can look at it on my phone. I find out what it is that they're about and how their format is. I listen to 1 or 2 episodes. Sometimes I listen to more if I like it. And I find out what the kinds of questions are that they ask. I find out how they engage with their audiences. I found one podcast, for example, where they basically have authors read the ends of their books. It's like, I don't know why they do this. Based on their website, I thought it was brilliant. And I realized you're only giving away the end. I'm not quite sure I understand what their strategy is, but I'm putting them on the bottom of my list for now. Then there are others where they talk a bit about the authors, but then they are very, very concentrated on the characters. So I love those because I really think if you read a book that's fiction, you have to love the characters, and then you're forgiving if there is head hopping or other stylistic issues. And then you want to know how the story unfolds for these heroes. So I listen to their podcasts. I tell them in those emails, I try to tell them what I liked. I try to be very positive about it. And I'm always making sure that I call them by their names. I at least put the effort in to find out who the hosts are. There's usually this information quite easy to find on their website or so. And I leave them a 5-star review, and I write a review. So I don't just put the 5 stars. I try to put something that I thought the format was great, or their intro was great, or whatever it is that is positive. So it will draw other people in. And then I give them a pitch of what I have to offer, almost in a way that I pitch them indirectly some questions that they could ask me and then get me to talk about. And I have to tweak that for every podcast. So some of them, for example, if it's for authors, I talk about my experience of getting published, or like you and I are talking about marketing a book and reaching out to audiences. When I talk to romance readers, for instance, I tell them like, what is my favorite romance, or I write like XYZ authors, or I write in this era. If it's people who like historical fiction, I tell them I write specifically about the Regency era, so that they don't ask me questions about Victorian fiction or so.
Well, and the other thing that I like too is, and I remember when we were doing the press release together with going through that process, and you had it specifically mentioned about how this is similar to Bridgerton, and I thought that was just a great way for you to connect with that, because for the most part, people, even if they haven't seen the show, they're familiar with it, or they know Shonda Rhimes, who was the showrunner from Grey's Anatomy, and it was just a great way to really connect that together.
Yeah, I want to tell you something really fun about that. Since I'm writing historical fiction and romance is a subgenre of that, and then I'm kind of coining my own subgenre as Regency fiction with a Jewish twist, people are giving me a hard time sometimes about the premise. For example, in this first series, the family is hiding that they are Jewish because they want to infiltrate the Ton, which is Britain's aristocracy. And the whole premise is that they're hiding that they're Jewish because there were no Jews among the Ton. There were, however, and I've done quite a bit of research about this, many, many Jewish families in England around that time that raised their children without telling them that they are Jewish. So I don't think it's a far cry for me to play this what if scenario out. Plus it's fiction. So I'm not even saying that any of these people existed. And I've gotten some interesting feedback from other authors who said, well, I've always wanted to write Jewish fiction, and I haven't thought of this, and I don't know why you get to think of it. It's like, well, that kind of sucks, but that's how it goes. You write something that someone else has not thought of, and you try to create your niche. And I've been trying to do it. I hope that it will become successful more and more. And I would love to rather collaborate with other authors than to be in competition with them, because I think there are enough readers and there's so many books anyway. Nobody's going to write the only book in the market anymore. And so talking about Bridgerton is really empowering, because the show has given us a level of diversity for this Regency period in the romance genre that is unprecedented. And I really love that I can read and learn from Julia Quinn, and that she has opened up the market to allow me to do something like the what if there were Jews among British aristocracy? What would happen if they were to fall in love and they wanted to dance at those balls? And what if they had Like in book one, somebody blackmailing them. How would that work out? So talking about Julia Quinn, I think my connection to her work goes really deep, and I really appreciate what she put out there.
Well, and speaking of books, I'd like to know what is your favorite book as a reader, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
So I've been thinking about this for a while. My all-time, absolutely all-time book that I love, and I love so many books, Paul. I was an English major in college, and I'm a lawyer, and sorry, I have so many books and so many that I love. But my all-time favorite is called Lydia, Queen of Palestine by Uri Orlev. And the first time I read it, I was about 13 or 14 years old, and I read it in its German translation. And it's basically a story about a Jewish girl, and the Holocaust hits where she's from in Romania. And she's put on one of those children's transports to Israel, which was just being founded. And her parents told her, you do this, we'll try to find you. And she grew up alone at this kibbutz, and you'd think she never will see her parents again, but they find her. So as a German Jew, I grew up as the only kid in town, hiding who I was, and I often thought I was alone. And every time I read this book, Lydia, Queen of Palestine, it was like talking to a really good friend. And I'm even getting goosebumps now telling you about it, because I love that book so much. Because you don't have to be alone. And sometimes books can be your best friends and give you much of the strength.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's one of the nice things with it, is really is that connection between ourselves and the books that we read. And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
I had a hard time narrowing it down. I'll give you the one that I think is more useful. The quote is, there's no good writing, only good editing. And I think it's so true, because when you get a story on the page, or even when you get nonfiction on the page, you have to go back and edit it over and over and over. You have to sharpen the prose, improve the descriptions, make sure it fits with your audience. Whatever you need to do, every take makes it a little bit better. And so there is no good writing. It's okay sometimes to just get it on the page. And that puts me back into the first question. It's like, finish it, put it down once. Then if you want, you can step back, and then you have to edit what you're doing.
And what was the other quote?
The other quote, I actually don't remember where I have it from, but I have it on a sticky note on my desk. It says, I'm paraphrasing, I'm not at my desk now. It says, if you want to be a good author, or if you want to be a good writer, put your ego in your back pocket and sit on it. And that's also so true, because you have to get past this point of, like, sometimes I feel like, well, I'm a professor, and this is my 7th textbook, and I know what I'm talking about. Or if I'm writing something about characters, like I make them up, so I know what they're saying, I know what they sound like in my head. You can't have this kind of haughtiness anymore. This was what authors did probably 150 years ago. These days, it is important to write with the readers and your audience in mind. So it's good that you have a message or a story or any theme that your book is going to fit into, but you have to put your ego aside, be humble, take feedback, digest the feedback. You don't have to make every change people suggest, but then have a reason for not taking it. And then you will just become so much better at your work, because you kind of get over your ego, or you put it in your back pocket and sit on it.
Excellent. Well, Sarah, I want to thank you for being part of our show today. What is the best way for people to find you online?
The best way for people to find me is on my website. It's saradrien.com. And you can sign up if you would like to for a newsletter. At the moment, everybody who signs up gets a free recipe collection with really fun recipes that my characters are encountering in the first series. And I'm writing a novella right now with more Arnold, for everybody who loved Arnold. And it's going to be my new reader magnet sometime very soon. But you can sign up for my newsletter and stay up to date on giveaways. I'm raffling off paint by numbers all the time. And I am reaching out with social media to people, and there are all the links as well as the trailers for my books on my website.
Well, Sarah, I want to thank you once again for being part of our show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey.
Thank you so much, Paul. It was a pleasure to speak with you and to work with you, and thank you again for the chance to speak with your audience.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.